Hello everyone and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing. We have a wonderful and hopefully spicy episode today, which is all about red flags when you're looking for your next marketing job, or if you're someone looking for your next marketer. With us, we have the wonderful Brian. I won't spoil his intro and I'll let him introduce himself. Brian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruta. I will probably get tongue-tied too. But so I'm Brian. You may have noticed I've got a bit of an odd accent. So I hail from the land of Glasgow up in Scotland. So I am the head of Marketing and Digital, which is a bit of a long, I won't say a naughty word title, but I basically head up the kind of marketing and digital division for a boutique recruitment agency in the central belt of Scotland. I also run a pretty big marketing meetup as well called the Scottish Marketing Network 2. So I'm a recruiter by day, networker by night, and just a lover of all things marketing.
We spoke about this a little bit when we met up before this recording, and you shared with us some really awesome insights about the current kind of state of play when it comes to hiring marketers in the UK. So I was wondering if you could share that with the podcast listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's been pretty, anyone that's listening to this podcast, you know, of course, will most likely be a marketeer, and you've probably had a pretty wild few years, and I've kind of shared that journey with everyone. And I think kind of the kind of marketing sector when it comes to recruitment, I think is kind of like almost gone in synergy with kind of what's been going on with the economy and the world out there. You know, if we look back at 2020, of course, when the pandemic began, you know, things were absolutely crazy. And as you know, that horrible phrase of, you know, marketing's the first thing to get cut was true. But then after that, luckily things did boom, and especially in digital. You know, again, if we now go journey on through 2020, if you weren't online in 2020, you didn't exist. So that meant that every business and every agency was scrambling like crazy trying to recruit. So there was just, you know, such a shortage of candidates there. And probably towards the end of 2020 is when the market really did change, where before I feel like it was kind of level playing fields when it came to a marketeer looking for a job and someone looking for a marketeer. However, as the Hunger Games phrase go, the odds were in a marketeer's favour back in recent years because people were struggling so much to find that talent. So 2021 kind of was a bit like that. 2022 got a bit more volatile. You know, we had things like the mini budget, things like the war. That caused a lot of uncertainty across businesses. However, hiring did stay quite strong. I think just now we're a way to go into a bit of a kind of... hiring is still remaining strong, you know, and it's certainly, you know, we're not quite, you know, at a depression when it comes to the recruitment market and marketing, but I feel like maybe perhaps the playing fields are kind of being leveled a bit more again. So I think almost, I always say to this when I speak to marketeers, when you think about the market out there, just think about what's going on outside of your bubble.
Yeah, it certainly has been a wild few years if you've worked in marketing. And I think Ruta and I have both seen this. We've seen marketing teams absolutely decimated. And then we're also now seeing people trying to build their marketing teams back up again. But actually, I feel like there's quite a bit of a skills shortage when it comes to some marketer when you're hiring marketers. So I'd be really interested to hear, Brian, from your perspective, what are some of the experiences you're having while you're trying to help organisations recruit marketers at the moment?
Yeah, I think just in general, it's became just tough. There's so many factors, as I said, you know. If we were doing this podcast back in 2019, the market's so different compared to back then. As you said, you know, people have kind of scrambled to build marketing teams. You know, businesses before that didn't really have marketing teams, especially in the digital side, have tried to soak up talent. So if we look, for example, industry that I work in a lot up here in Scotland is the drinks industry. So you can imagine whiskey, you know, one of our kind of biggest exports. And that's an industry that was always a lot more old fashioned. It was kind of brand channel focused, whereas now it's gone really heavy on digital and, you know, heavy on kind of e-commerce and D2C. So now there's definitely a kind of shortage when it comes to digital. There's also a bit of a shortage of jobs there, so it's kind of like a bit of a catch-22 because jobs have slowed down from where they were before. So you're finding there's less candidates, there's a little bit less jobs just now. However, hopefully the second half of this year is looking promising, and we kind of get that little burst in Q3 of the year, you know, when things do pick up again. But what you're finding is it is just difficult, and back in the day, I used to work with a lot of clients and a lot of businesses. If there's any hiring managers listening to this, if they wanted to hire a marketeer again back 3, 4, 5 years ago, they could probably chuck up a job advert and someone would apply to it. Happy days, Bob's your uncle done. Whereas now you're having to go out and headhunt. And I've lost kind of the amount of businesses I've worked with that came to me that have said, I've never had to work with a recruiter before just because it's tough. I've got colleagues who recruit more in the tech industry, and it's always been really notoriously hard to recruit for developers. And it's probably became just as hard to recruit for like a PPC person as it is for a developer nowadays. It's just really wild, and I think there's so many factors. There's kind of apprehension out there. People are just less reluctant to take a risk at the moment. And we'll kind of go into all of this well, but just expectations are different now. People have different priorities, work-life balance, that type of thing. So
talk us through some of the shifts in priorities. Actually, I think we're really interested in this. So one of the things that we observed in 2020 is all of a sudden we're all at home, but flexible working became a bit more of a thing, hybrid working a bit more of an option, companies really showcasing they cared about their employees' well-being, but we seem to have kind of forgotten that a little bit. So what's your experience of that like? Because the culture thing is a big point, I think, when it comes to hiring.
Definitely, and I think those businesses are out there, they're focusing on their, employer value proposition are the ones that are probably winning at the moment, and they're the ones that probably are managing to find talent. There's crazy statistics out there, like, again, when you talk about surveys out there, there's God knows how many surveys, I won't kind of go into that, but like I was reading something, I think it's potential employees, candidates want they took a survey, 73% of people who got that survey said they'd only work with a business that actually lined up with their kind of morals and values. So things like that became so much more important nowadays. Been completely what you said before kind of the pandemic, things were quite bog standard. Benefits packages were a bit lacking probably back then, it was probably kind of basic. If you had a couple of extra days holidays on top of a base, yay, like fantastic, great stuff. Whereas now people are looking for a lot more. They're looking for learning and development budgets, right? Because marketing is a type of job you're in where you're constantly, everything's changing. If you're out of it for a year, things will have changed, algorithms will change. Look at GA4, things like that, things change kind of so quickly. So people are looking for like learning budgets, and of course you're looking for kind of flexibility. And so I think just the way forward is just treating your employees like adults is just so important, and that's predominantly what people are looking for just now. They just kind of don't want to be, they don't want to have a dictator for a boss, or above them within a business. So I think it's really interesting the way that has shifted. But the businesses, what's happening now, because things are tough out there, profits are going down across a lot of businesses, right? And what happens is business owners, they basically knee jerk and they go, oh shit, like what are we going to do? How can we control this? How can we take control back? And how can we try and, stop losing so much money? And of course, marketing, sales, just think of it as all the kind of same thing. A lot of businesses are reverting back to full-time in the office. And I think it's that C-suite business owners who want to just pull control back, and they want to see what's going on in front of them, and those are the businesses where I'm scooping talent up from, and it's fabulous because those people don't want to work there, and I'm going to find them even better jobs with great cultures and great values,
That makes so much sense. And I totally agree with seeing some of those knee-jerk reactions. I mean, we've seen it from, like huge company CEOs down to probably a 2-3 person company, all kind of happening in different variations, which kind of leads us on nicely to what are some of the things that marketers should be looking out for in job descriptions that might be red or green flags in your experience? And I think Emma and I will have a couple to add on as well.
Firstly, just job descriptions. This is probably more kind of recruitment talking, but how naff are some job descriptions out there. It's honestly infuriating. There's so many great people like on LinkedIn. The way a kind of business should work is you have a job description and you have a job advert, but your job advert should essentially be, it should be like your billboard. Like, why does someone want to come and work for that business? It should actually be trying to allure and pull that person in. So first and foremost, is the job ad any decent? If not, it could be issues. They might have internal resource, who knows? But probably one of the main things is if salary bands aren't being advertised, probably what that means is it probably means there's some maybe internal issues perhaps. It probably means that if people are, they maybe have 4 people the same level and there's a massive disparity in salaries. It could come down to that. It could come down to laziness. It could come down with businesses maybe, this is quite, I don't know if this is too rude a word, but wanted to shaft people. So it could be so many different things. So first and foremost that, but also a lot of businesses sometimes don't even put the benefits in, and again that's something that's like so basic, and some businesses don't have benefits, like for example if you're going into a startup you're probably not going to have great benefits. However, they might be able to offer you things maybe like an enhanced maybe like just base perhaps for you taking that risk, or it might just be things like a really flexible approach to work. So I posted a job not long ago for a marketing manager in a startup, and on the job advert, I basically was like, there's not really many benefits. However, you'll get to actually kind of sculpt that and help grow that from the beginning and be a really kind of key piece of that journey. So I think benefits is something that's just really basic. And if there's not benefits in a job advert, that probably then goes back to the chat, or is that business thinking of their employee value proposition? Like, are they actually thinking about what makes them an employer of choice? And if they're just chucking up we are looking for a social media marketing manager responsibilities, that is just kind of like, there's not really much humanity behind it. Probably sounds a bit dramatic, but there's not any thought process at all behind it. So I would just say make sure just the basics. It might generally be, though, you've got a business is really great and you've got a really overworked HR person, so sometimes it's easy to, I think, overthink these job adverts.
No, that totally makes sense. Emma, what are some of your red flags when it comes to job descriptions for marketers?
I think like specific for marketers, I think there's the and this is something that's quite tricky, especially if you're like a marketing manager or you're a head of marketing, so you're maybe a bit more of a generalist. But I think there needs to be a level of acceptance for employers that just because you're a marketing generalist, you literally cannot do everything. So I think if you read a job description that's like, you need to be the social media manager, you need to edit video, you need to be running campaigns, you need to be doing the PPC, the SEO. Seriously, I know we're going to get fucked. That job is fucked. That's not a job. That's not a job that you want. So I think know that in your heart of hearts. It's okay to be a marketer and a good marketer and accept there are things you can't do, and also not go and work for people who expect you to do everything.
And the market's even more segmented as well, though, now. That's like something to think about as well, if like marketers are out there looking for jobs, but the market's got even more segmented than before. Like before you just had paid media specialists, it's clearly defined into paid social, things like that have really split down. So yeah, when you have people looking for things like that, or the number one thing is when they want a marketer, it can also be a graphic designer. I mean,
I always want some basic information. For example, like who will I be reporting into? Sometimes you don't have that, what the team structure is like. Again, sometimes you don't have that on job ads, and they're not hard to put in. Like I think, to me at least, it makes sense to have those things in there. And then also a big red flag for me is buzzwords. So if it's like rockstar, superstar, ninja, all-star, world class, award-winning, streamline, optimize, whatever other words you can come up with, for me, I find buzzwords really off-putting, and it might just be I'm very dramatic about that. But if you're looking for a rockstar marketer to join your team of 0, not for me, mate, not for me.
But it's just laziness, though, isn't it? That's kind of what I was saying. Like, it's basically just like pulling all the generic stuff rather than, as you said, Ruta, like, putting a team structure in. It's so, like, if I was hiring for a marketing manager, like, it's so easy to just say, in this role you'll work closely with the head of marketing leading the market. It's like one line, isn't it? So it's just when they just pull the generic crap and don't put any effort in, which is not good at all. This is one thing I'd say is probably actually quite valuable to kind of people listening to this, because one thing I'm finding is crazy at the moment is people are actually being put off by applying to jobs at the moment because of the sheer volume of applicants. So I don't know how many people I talked to, or they've looked at a job of mine and actually said, I didn't think there'd be any point applying because so many people applied to it. And I saw like a post the other day of like a job posted last year. I had, I think, 134 applicants and 5 people were shortlisted. And then this year there was like 900 applicants and none of those people were relevant. And what's happening is because of things like well, there's kind of numerous things to begin with. Firstly, see on LinkedIn, it says how you've got the total applicants. Probably 75% of my applicants are out of the country. Now, LinkedIn kind of works like automated and rejects all of the people that aren't, eligible to work in the UK, unless, of course, that business offers sponsorship. Then I would open that up, but I predominantly work with SMEs who are, so firstly, that number is incorrect. If a job role says 100 people have applied to it, maybe only like 20, 30 of those people actually are kind of right for the jobs. I would definitely say, like, please don't be put off applying to jobs when you see the numbers, because naturally you will be. If you're in a race with 10 people, you might think you have a chance, but if you're against 100 people in a field, you're probably going to go, maybe not, so definitely don't be put off by numbers, because it's wild out there. And it's now because of everything is like so automated. When I was recruiting back in kind of 2018, marketers love doing a cover letter. Now, I'm not a fan of cover letters, and because I'm a recruiter, I basically write your cover notes for you. So go chill. I'll make sure that you get an interview, like happy days, and I'm gonna do my utmost to represent you in the best way. But marketers loved the cover letter, a few years ago. However, now you don't get cover letters at all, and people are like really against them. So now on LinkedIn, it's just easy apply. People just apply to it and go utterly wild. And I spend so much time in my day. Like today, I've had like 3 people who are graduates apply for like an up to 60k marketing manager role. This says you need to have however many years of experience. Like I think like it even said like 3 years of team leadership and stuff. So that again is a bit of a ramble. But if marketers are listening to this, like, don't be scared to apply to jobs because you see crazy numbers. Because if you do see a job ad that doesn't have the green flags and it doesn't have red flags and has a ton of green flags, then don't like dishearten yourself because you think, oh, those numbers are wild, because it's just crazy. Again, it's just like another example of just things are crazy out there.
It's all wild, isn't it? I recently wrote a job description for a marketer, and I have to say I think I did a really good job. Brian, you can maybe check it later and see what you think. But one of the things that I was really keen to put in there was some green flags that I thought marketers would be like, okay, this person who wrote this works in marketing. So things like, I even wrote in there, we work with the senior leadership team who actually understand marketing and want to support you. So even just things like that, where I was like, well, firstly, the company that I was writing it about, it's not bullshit, it's the truth. So I was like, well, there's some really nice bits in there that I thought, if I read that, and I know I'm biased because I wrote it myself, but I would feel like that person who wrote it took the time to understand what the role was really about. And then also some specific stuff around metrics and tech that we would be using, again, because marketers have preferences and all those kind of things. So if you want to hire that data-driven marketer that likes using HubSpot, I'm not promoting the job, by the way, but if you want that, that's what you get in the job advert. So you actually understand, like how this team is actually set up. So I'm interested, are there any other things that you think, if you're writing a description, that you should, outside of those things that we talked about that are kind of like the opposite of the red flags, is there anything else you'd recommend people put in there?
Yeah, what you said is absolutely bang on about like tools, like is so important. And I've spoken with marketeers who are like really senior, and they say to me, can you look at my CV? And I speak to so many people, and I say to them, I'm like, I don't have a job for you, right? But let's have a look at your CV and see if we can position yourself. Because the number one tip I say to marketers, see if you're going out to the market and looking for something new. Sometimes people are overwhelmed, but I always kind of say to them, like, stop a minute and just think, you're a marketeer, so you need to think how you can market yourself, and the number one thing that people forget on their CV is to put tools, believe it or not. Like, people say I've done this and I've done that, or they forget to put percentages, they've done this, they've done that, and that then kind of then bleeds to job adverts, because maybe the people writing those job adverts are the people who would write a CV and wouldn't think to put down that they're working with like Data Studio or something like that, so the tool thing is like so important. Like, I've seen job specs before and it says working, working on campaigns, but what's a campaign on? A campaign can be across God knows how many channels, and when roles are really broken down, if you're in a business, it might be really heavy towards paid or something like that, or like I said, you might be using something like HubSpot perhaps, which is a bit more niche. So definitely breaking down the tools of saying this is what you need to do. And the way I kind of always say with a job ad, you get those people who are a bit gun-ho and just apply to any job. I always say to them, if I need to ever be a bit honest and say, stop applying to every job that you can, I say just look at the tools and do you work with those tools? It's almost trying to kind of cross it over and see. So that's majorly important. Other things with kind of job ads as well. Again, this sounds kind of so simple as well, but if you're LinkedIn's probably the most kind of popular place for looking for a job now, and I think because it's just easy, isn't it? Do bear in mind though, again, I go off on many tangents here, but see if you're actually in the market and you're applying to jobs as a marketeer, you might just resign yourself to LinkedIn. But what happens is businesses have a recruitment budget. They maybe only have however many hundred or thousands, and they might only choose to use one platform. So I work with businesses who just use Total Jobs, or they just use Indeed, or they just use LinkedIn. So make sure you're looking at every different kind of avenue that you can. But the easy way to do that is use LinkedIn and use Google. Google's basically like an aggregator, and it pulls all the different job ads into the one place. So again, that's just like a random tip, but people don't seem to realize that, but it pulls all the jobs together from Total Jobs, Indeed, Monster, all into the one place. So make sure that you do that as well. But yeah, I would just say listing tools, and also in job ads, see if there's a contact in that business. You'll see who the listing's advertised to. If you genuinely think the role is right and it's all value to both parties, rather than applying where you get lost in those crazy numbers that I'm mentioning, just hit up the person directly, send them a cheeky wee email and just say, hey, how are you doing? Just thought I'd reach out before applying. I think I'm good for this XYZ, because I find the people that do that tend to be the ones who have put a bit more thought and actually understood a job advert and understood that this resonates with me, I could do this, rather than just pressing quick apply and getting on with it.
Yep, exactly as you said. So speaking of the marketer interviewing the person or the company that they might be applying to, what kind of questions do you recommend, I guess, that your candidates always ask when they're interviewing?
I feel like we've kind of moved away from competency in recent years, but a lot of businesses like to kind of do a mixture of competency plus organic. I think organic's always nice because you kind of get to know what the chemistry is like, and I think now when I work with my clients, I probably see like 50% is kind of culture, chemistry, and 50% is can you do the job, and that is for both parties. But in an interview, if you imagine, you will have both interviewed numerous people through the years. You have your list of questions. You do need to have those questions answered. You need to know if they maybe, I don't know, say we're interviewing a PPC person, what campaigns they work with, what clients, what budgets, what ROI have they generated, things like that. Those are the questions that will always be there. But probably what you want to know is you probably want to know a bit more of the actual day-to-day. So just some simple questions like you could be saying, what's a 9 to 5 look like within this role? When I'm starting the day, what does that day look like? How's it structured? How much is it on that? How much am I dealing with clients, internal stakeholders? What does that look like? Asking perhaps, if people have came in this position, what's their progression path been like? When we personally interview people in 920, one thing we like to do is we actually get other team members who are maybe a bit more senior than the person involved to join the interview process, so they can actually see that how they can progress through the business. Because again, that's so important. If someone's sat in front of you, you want to be able to say to them, this is how you're going to progress. So always ask about progression, but actually ask for tangible examples of that. Like, has Ruta came in from exec and worked her way up to a senior manager, so ask about kind of all those types of things as well. And again, I think it's probably just knowing, probably the number one piece of advice I would just say is just knowing like you can ask questions and you can ask a question. I think some people at the end of an interview, I think now more than ever, employers actually get a little bit kind of blown away if people don't have questions at the end. So just know you can ask questions, but ask what's important to you. Do you really care about DE&I? Is that something that's really close to your heart? Myself was like a member of the kind of LGBTQIA plus community. That's something I would ask if I was interviewing. So if that's important to you, what's the business done in that regards? How do they actually commit to that? Asking like, what do they actually do as team building? Asking, for example, learning and development might be important to you. So what do you actually do to promote that internally? Do you allocate time per week? Do you allocate a budget? What do you actually do? Again, that should have been in the job advert, but anyway. So again, just know there's all the kind of basics. I'd probably say just try and kind of go a bit more into the granular stuff of the day-to-day. Like, what does a day-to-day look like? How does that look? Ask questions that are close to your heart as well. And then when you ask about things like progression, just make sure, because number one reason I probably speak to people is they maybe not seen progression, things like that. Ask what's the progression, is it quarterly, half reviews? What do you need to hit targets to move up? Things like that. Just go granular and ask what like really matters to you, like in your heart, like what, because you need to align again. Like I said, that survey way back saying 73% of people will only go with an employer that aligns with their values. Make sure you ask the questions that align with your values.
No, I was just going to ask you if there's some that you would add that are marketing specific. I've got a few, but you go first. What would you add?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a red flag when you are interviewing anyone and you're like, have you got any questions? They're like, no. I'm just like, really? But besides that point, yeah, so for me, it's very much about interviewing the other company. Not to sound pompous by any means, but like having a new job is a huge risk, right? So you need to make sure that you can kind of suss the company out, because also people can say a lot of things that sound good, but then when you dig into it, it's not quite what it seems like. So like when Brian said, dig into what the day-to-day looks, I'm very much about digging into like the money and the targets and how the company's doing. And I think that's specifically because I've got a startup background, so it's important to know, things like what the runway is of the company. Are they going to at their current spending rate, run out of money in the next 12 months, 14, 18, 24 months? And what's the plan for that? So are they going to raise an investment? Okay, excellent. And then what is that investment based on? Is it based on marketing performance, on sales performance, or is it going to happen anyway because that's where they're heading to? So the financial side of things is really important. As well as kind of what the expectations of the team are. Again, I'm talking to someone who would be interviewing for a head of marketing type role. So, if they're building a brand new marketing function, what are their expectations in terms of performance? Do they want us to start hitting target month one, day one? Do they understand that there's a ramp up and a sales cycle and I guess a general experimentation cycle that you have to include? So kind of understanding what they want from you on that granular level, because it might sound great and it might be a company that's just raised a bunch of money and they're getting a new team in and you're going to be able to hire all of these people, but actually it turns out if within the first 2 months you don't hit target, they're going to fire you. Like that's the kind of reality you have to play with. And again, I'm super biased because I'm in the startup world, right? So I know it's kind of extreme in that sense, but that's the real kind of important stuff that I want to know. What about you, Emma?
Yeah, but I'd agree with you. And I think, whether you're B2B or B2C, I think it's really important because we see the job cuts, they're not just in the tech industry at the moment, they kind of extend past that. And I think have it, and we always advocate for marketers kind of, knowing their metrics and then, asking those kind of questions. So I think absolutely interrogate all of that stuff, sales. If you want to get into it, be like, what's your sales cycle? What's your, all of those kind of things, like ask those questions. I also think one of the things that happens a lot as a marketer is you are asked to generally do some sort of assessment that is kind of, a task-based assessment. And there's a lot of red flags around that. So, and there's a lot of, when you go into marketing Facebook groups or marketing Twitter, you see a lot of talk about these tasks because effectively, people are sort of like, write us a 12-month campaign plan or a marketing plan for the next 12 months. And I would say, again, that's just a lack of understanding about marketing. So I think you can infer a lot by what the task is that you've been asked to do. And, if it's something that actually someone would pay you to do, don't do it. Never, or go back and actually explain why it's not something that you're able to do. I had that once, actually. Someone asked me to come up with a 12-month marketing plan, and I did go back and I was like, and they gave me 2 weeks to do it, to be fair, but I was like, I can't do that because this is work that someone would pay me to do. So no thanks, but no thanks. So I think that's
a shady area. Shady areas tasks like that is how to rub someone up the wrong way.
that happens a lot to marketers. You know, it's talk that I've seen quite a lot of. So I think, you know, you need to pay really close attention to what it is they're asking you to do. Always, like I say, interrogate the metrics, and also be really honest about the way that you like to work. So when you're talking to presumably the person that might potentially be your manager in an interview, do feel free to interrogate like their management style, because I think there could be, you might be on an interview and you might click, but then you kind of do need to suss out whether that person's a micromanager. Are they kind of a, you know, going to throw you under the bus type person? You know, who is it that's in front of you? So do talk about things like, I like to work like this. You know, how does that fit in with the team structure? You know, and Ruta and I talk about this stuff a lot because we've worked in HR tech, so we know, you know. So ask things like, how do you measure performance? Do you do OKRs? Do you have metrics? Is that regularly checked on? All that kind of stuff, so that you're really sure that, yeah, the person sitting in front of you who's your manager is going to have your back. Because we all know in marketing, when the shit hits the fan, then the blame is thrust upon us. So like, make sure that you're sure that the person who is you're going to be reporting into is going to have your back for sure.
Definitely. Like, one thing I would add to that is, in recent years, because it's become harder to find talent nowadays, like, companies have probably got a bit more desperate and probably, you know, use some shady tactics to get people on board. And that's, you know, I've spoken to so many people through the years, and you speaking about asking about financials, Ruta, that's so important. I spoke to someone who works in really stable enterprise sized businesses and decided to go to a startup. She was senior, like head of marketing level, and unfortunately investment didn't come through, and the investment hadn't actually came when she had joined the business. It was still, you know, but she didn't know that, and she didn't know to ask those questions, you know. And I think as well, she kind of was quite open and said she was almost probably scared to ask those questions, because I think, you know, it's that way, like, you probably wouldn't ask someone like what's in their bank account, you know. And I think that's kind of what people think when they're asking a business, like, what actually is your kind of current turnover, you know, what's your projected, you know, how feasible is that looking, how are you performing for the year, the quarters, how does all of those things look. But don't be afraid to ask those questions, because honestly, when I speak to marketers, that's the thing, they are a bit like, oh, should I ask that? Honestly, just remember, the thing nowadays, acting like I'm an old man here, but nowadays it's a two-way street. Like, it's a two-way street. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And when I speak to candidates after they've interviewed my clients, I always say to them, like, but how do you feel about it? Like, how do you feel about them? Have you got any red flags, any concerns? Like, what do you feel like? And if they do have any concerns and they go to second stage, I'm like, right, okay, well, let's make sure we get all of that ironed out, you know, things like that. It's just there's too much, like, I was going to say mis-selling, but just too much kind of cloak and daggers going on at the moment. People just being mis-sold roles and being told they're one thing, then they actually go into the role and it's another thing. So be really thorough.
Just to add to what Brian said about asking about financials, in the startup world, it's totally normal because we all talk about this. We publish, you know, how much money we got from somewhere. Like, it's totally open, so don't be scared. But in a normal company, it might actually be a benefit for you asking those questions, because it, at least for me, it says that you're thinking about the business performance as a whole, not just as your team, as the marketing department. And it takes you away from being the colouring in department and puts you into the finance money making department if you're asking those questions. So I think, at least for me, if somebody in an interview is asking those questions, I'm like, yes, they understand what it takes to run a business, hence the marketing function will understand how to run as a business. And if your interviewer gets put off by that, then honestly, too bad on them. Like, it's a completely legit and good question to ask as far as I'm concerned. But again, just my opinion. So I'm sorry if that doesn't pan out for you.
I'm with you. Like, if someone doesn't ask me what my marketing ROI is, I'm upset. I'm like, come on, man, ask. Even if my current ROI is shit and I'm ashamed, ask me what it is. And also, then you'll know from the answer whether you want the job. Because if I say it's 0, you might not want the job. But if I say it's like 10, you'll also be like, there's something crazy going on here. So I agree with you, Ruta. Like, do not be ashamed of asking the question around the money. On the theme of interviews, what sort of questions do we think that execs or like people who are recruiting should be asking marketers?
there's probably a lot of correlation with the kind of previous answers that we just gave there, if I'm being honest. Like, it probably is like things about kind of, numbers and such like, and actually asking for, again, if I look at CVs, that's the kind of trying to edge the door open before you even do an interview. And that's what people always seem to kind of lack on their CV, is putting down actual, this is what I delivered and these are the numbers and this is what kind of, how I've succeeded. And again, the two of you come from a particular background where you're that savvy and you're all about kind of numbers and looking at data, but a lot of marketers aren't like that, and now the market's all about data. It's data everywhere, and I hate to like say to people, you should definitely be investing in that side of marketing because you might be a creative soul and you have an interest in data. But it's all about that, and in essence, the proof is in the pudding. The data tells you a story, doesn't it? So I would just kind of say, definitely you want to kind of be asking about kind of numbers, and what they've done. And when you're actually asking questions, try not to be so rigid. People hate competency questions nowadays. Like, people freaking hate it. Like, you feel really like uptight and like trying to answer to a star technique and things like that. So what I'd probably say is, if you're say you're a recruiter or you're like a head of marketing or you're hiring for your team, probably try and get into the flow of doing organic interviews. The reason being is you're then able to qualify the person if they can do something technically. So you can maybe talk about something they've done. Let's say we're talking about a campaign and go into the granular, go into the numbers. How did they feel? What was the outcome? What did they learn? Things like that. But also, if you're being organic, you can actually build a relationship and have a bit of a laugh and see if there's a connection made as well, because that's as important as well. So we definitely, the world of marketing, it's a creative industry, and that's what I love about it. I'm quite a creative soul, so I love the day in, day out. I'm doing recruitment, but I'm talking to really vibrant people. They've got really lovely personalities. Like, I love that. So you probably want your interview process to like reflect the market. If you're recruiting for like an admin person, yeah, you might be a bit more regimented, but try and be kind of fluid with it. So probably do that as well, and then probably kind of ask them there's so many kind of buzz questions out there. Like, you have all those silly ones of like, how would like your friends describe you and things like that. You can maybe throw quirky stuff in there, but I think just kind of get to know the person, get to know results, and just, I don't know, like, just, I'm going off on a tangent here, but try and be organic, like try and connect to the person. Because remember as well, as much as you're interviewing them, again, going back to what they're saying, like they're interviewing you as well. So you need to, you need to think, if you were in their shoes, what are they going to like?
I always love asking that question, like, tell me about when something went wrong and what you learned and what you did differently the next time. And as a marketer, that's what we're all about. We're all about, like, you experiment, you'd get stuff wrong. Sometimes you waste a bit of cash doing it, but like, what did you learn and how did you improve on it next time so that didn't happen again? And I think I always really struggle when people aren't honest about that. And like, because we've all had failures.
I've never had a failure. I only succeed.
Or they pick something really small, like, oh, I emailed this email to the wrong list, and it's like, come on, man, like, pick something, substantial. Yeah, we've all done that, or put a typo in 20 social posts, at least, Yeah, I totally agree. I think that question also, for me, it's important for the person to be like emotionally intelligent, and I know that that's a buzzword, but what I mean is, yeah, it's important for someone to be aware of how they feel, how that affects their work, but also how that affects other people's work. So with asking questions like that, like, what was a really tough part of your career, and what happened, how did you overcome it? I'm looking for a signal of vulnerability, and as an interviewer, that's what I'll try to push for, try to see if they will share something that shows that they are aware and they've overcome something, instead of kind of putting up a wall. Because I find that in general, if you put up a wall to a question like that, which isn't even that personal of a question, really in an interview, it's likely that you will do that to whoever you manage or whoever you work with. And I'm personally not a fan of that. I know that some people like to work in that way, but for me, I'm always looking for that little piece of vulnerability, to see if they're willing to share and to go there, which might sound really horrible now that I say it, but
no, social
it is what I look
and
for.
Emotional intelligence is so important. Like, that's when you kind of see, I don't know, that's the people that end up being disliked in a workplace, and end up causing drama and stuff, so yeah, it's about thinking, if you're a business, what's your values, like what's and does that person align with that again?
Yeah. And, you know, everyone's great until the bad day comes where their bad day behavior comes out, and you kind of want to know what that's going to be like in advance. And I might be an oversharer, and Brian, you might be like, never fucking say that in an interview, but I'm more than happy to share like my disc profiles and say I'm extremely like high red and demanding, and when I get stressed I get even worse. So that is what you should expect of me. If I'm under stress, I want to control everything, and that's how I'm going to act. So if you're not okay with that, or you know, if you see that, please tell me I'm doing it, because sometimes I don't know I'm doing it, and I'm okay with that. But again, you might not be willing to share things like that.
And this is why I think the organic approach is so important, but it's then asking, but like, how do you deal with that, and how do you want others to deal with it? It's that kind of volleying, which is why I hate kind of regimented, if an interview, you've got 6 questions, see you later, speak to you in 24 hours, you know, it's the whole actually volley. So if you, like I said, that's what you were like, and I would say, well, how is that kind of fared in previous environments? How did people deal with it? You know, was there certain team members that, you know, were able to deal with it better? You know, how would you want us to deal with it? Things like that, you know, like, because if that's how you react, I doubt that, you know, you end up being destructive and crazy in the workplace. It's probably just you've learned how to work with others, and you know how to kind of manage each other. People know how to manage upwards and things like that, which is why the volleying is so important.
I think that goes back to that whole like interrogating the manager as well, right? So you might be in this scenario, Ruta, you might have been applying for the job, but equally you might be the manager. So if I didn't ask you that question, if I didn't say, how do you actually like to work, Ruta? Like, you're going to be my manager, so how do you like to be or how do you like to manage people, or vice versa? Like, how do you like to be managed? You know, my profiles always come back, and they always basically say that I'm an asshole, and that I don't like to work in a team, and that I don't trust anybody. But it's because of the type of jobs we do, right, that it comes back with that kind of thing. And Ruta will hopefully tell you that that's not true about me, but it's because I equally struggle to let go and trust people. So you have to get that out in the open. But otherwise
no,
it becomes
it's
really,
a good and
really
the bad.
challenging.
It's a good and the bad, isn't it? I think there's this whole kind of, there's this whole kind of mindset, I think, and I think we've got so many things in the kind of workplace that have just been there through the years. You know, let's talk about the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 in an office. That came from days when people were working in factories, things like that. And I think that whole piece of, you know, being perfect and, you know, showing up in your suit and tie and things like that, you know, and perhaps not showing personality and showing emotion, I think we're almost kind of old-fashioned concepts. I'm probably not wording that right, but they were kind of just work was different. It very much was like you were there and you had your boss and you, and that was it. Whereas now things like challenging your manager and things like that, people probably wouldn't have done that so much like in previous decades. So I just think things have changed so much, and I think now it's really good to be aware of and think about the good and the bad. And it's that whole piece that people aren't thinking about the bad. How are they going to improve? You know, do they have that growth mindset? You know, you need to have that self-awareness and know if you're crap is something, or you easily get angry or wound up. But if you're aware of that, hey, you're like, that's you already, you know, like on your way, because you're consciously thinking of it. And I think that's so important with marketeers, you know, having that growth mindset and wanting to grow, because again, marketing keeps evolving like crazy. Let's not even talk about AI just now. You know, every year there's something crazy going on. So yeah, again.
And if you really want to ask those kind of questions, and this works both ways. If you're interviewing or being interviewed, you can share something about yourself and then be like, oh, like, do you know any of these things that you do? Or like, what about you? What kind of disc profile do you have? It's an easy way to see as well if they're willing to share with you and go back the other way, because sometimes it's hard to just be open and talk about stuff. But if you share something, someone is much more likely to share with you as well, because you've been vulnerable. Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. I feel like we could have continued that discussion forever. There's so much to get into when it comes to marketing, jobs and interviewing and everything. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. We hope that everybody who's listening has found this useful. And do remember that if you are looking for another job, you don't have to take the first one that you're offered. That's my final tidbit. So thanks everybody, and tune in next time.